Hey folks, welcome back to My Kitten Reads. I'm Eleanor and welcome to a slightly, but only by a couple of days delayed, wrap up of my reading of July 2023. So I read 13 things in July. A lot of it was rereading. A lot of it was very frivolous and didn't meet most or any of my reading goals, but I was reading, and enough that I started to catch up a bit on my overall reading goal. Which of course my last video was an update as to where I was with that at the end of the month. So yeah, but still 13 things are great. Unfortunately, none of them were by authors of non-white heritage and none of them had particularly strong queer characters. So that's a thing. But still, I did do a lot of reading, even if it was mostly like period dramas, basically. Yeah, it was a whole thing. So what did I start the month with? I did a lot of audiobook reading. And I'm still kind of in the process of doing a lot of audiobook reading because I've been very busy and very stressed at work, and so audiobooks keep me focused. So I re-listened to the audiobook of Cocaine Blues by Kerry Greenwood, which is the first of the Miss Fisher novels. It's also the one that was adapted into the first TV episode. In this, Miss Fisher arrives in Melbourne, having been asked by a family friend who she impressed with her investigative powers in London, to look in on their daughter who keeps getting sick every time she goes back to living with her husband after she's been away on holiday and gotten healthy. And anyway, and so she arrives in Melbourne and immediately gets embroiled in a whole bunch of stuff with Russian dancers, with cocaine, with new friends and a new maid and an abortion racket and all sorts of things. And so we're introduced to Miss Fisher. Then I read a newer book by Pride and Prejudice Federation by Lara Berkendig called The Talented Daughters of Longbourn. I've read some of her stuff before. I can be hit and miss on whether or not her concepts are ones I'm interested in. In this particular one, all of the daughters of Longbourn have sort of talents, artistic talents, that kind of thing. And hiding from their parents, they use those talents in order to try and set themselves up with a future. In the case of Jane, she's a sculptor and they've got an uncle that helps her. In the case of Elizabeth, it was... I can't actually remember what Elizabeth was. It's been like a whole month since I read it. Writing maybe? I'm not sure. I am not sure. But essentially, yes, the Sisters of Longbourn are preparing for their futures by using their artistic talents. And therefore they are far more confident and far more involved in various bits of societies than they usually are in the novel. So romantic shenanigans ensue. Then I listened to the audiobook for Flying High by Kerry Greenwood, which is the second one. This one is not really part of the TV show, I don't think, but it involves a kidnapping and it involves a son who has an argument with his father, and then his father is found dead, bashed over the head, but all is not what it seems. So there is flying, there are children that are getting up to shenanigans. Yeah, so that's the second Miss Fisher. Then I read some more Pride and Prejudice variations. So Love Unrestricted was a new one by Shana Grandison, which is actually a sequel to one that she did, I want to say earlier this year, which was about a widowed Lady Catherine falling in love. Oh no, hang on. There's been a couple of those like that recently. I think this is the one where Mr. Bennet and Lady Catherine were in love, were separated by Lady Catherine's parents and their various marriages. And then, they eventually find their way back to each other after years and years of being apart due to the appearance of Lady Catherine's nephews near Longbourn. So this was the sequel to that. So after they've gotten back together and they're getting married, and getting their children all sorted out. Then I reread one called Longborn Son by Lara Kendig, in which Mrs. Bennet does give birth to twins for her fourth childbirth. So Kitty's twin is the long-awaited son. And so that, of course, changes their circumstances even after Mrs. Bennet passes away after Lydia's birth. The fact that they have a brother changes everything. Then I reread Jane Bennet Takes Charge by Shana Grandison, which is one of the Take Charge series, which I was sort of rereading out of order, and in which Jane Bennet has more of a spine than she's shown before. Followed by Mr. Bingley Takes Charge by the same author, in which Mr. Bingley decides to take control of his life a bit earlier and therefore puts restraints on Caroline, on the Hursts, and even on his friendship with Darcy. Then I reread an actual book, Lady Susan by Jane Austen, which is a little novella that is epistolary and written, which means written in letter forms, and is a bit of a French farce, to be honest, except not French, English, but it's a farce. It's a romantic farce, all about high society and flirting. Then I actually read a book off my TBR shelf, which is new to me, which is Sophie Irwin's A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting, which is essentially a Regency romance in which our main character, her parents have recently died, her engagement at the start of the book is cancelled, and she doesn't know why, to the local squire, and she was counting on that to save herself and her sisters, because her parents have left debt and they're about to lose their house. So she and one of her other sisters head to London so she can hunt herself up a fortune-having husband. Shenanigans ensue. It was quite an amusing read, to be honest. Then I reread Anne de Bourgh Takes Charge, in which, as usual with that series, Anne de Bourgh takes charge of her own life and her own inheritance and makes friends with the Bennet sisters. Then I read A Devoted Sister by Jan Roland, which is another new PNP variation, in which Jane is already married when our story starts to a wealthy neighbour, and she is therefore very confident and takes her sisters in hand and gives Elizabeth a place to flee to when she needs it. And so their interactions, of course, with the Bingley and Darcy party are, again, very different. Yeah, I read a lot of PNP variations, and I didn't even include them all in this list because some of them were just, I'd read them so many times that it was like, Then there was another new one called Much Pride, Prejudice and Sensibility by Shana Grandison, which actually, for once, includes the Sense and Sensibility characters. I wasn't as enamoured with this one because there was a lot of sort of telling of who's related to who and who's interested in who and whose lineage is this and whose lineage is that. But essentially, it does involve both characters from Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility getting to know each other, which, you know, I always appreciate. And then finally, I finished another audiobook, which was a non-fiction audiobook, but on the theme, it was Lucy Worsley's biography, Jane Austen at Home, which is all about sort of the home life of Jane Austen and where she lived and what it was like, and you know, what the differences were between, you know, growing up in a parsonage and then having to live in Bath, and then having to put together a household after her father passed away, containing herself, her mother and her sister Cassandra, without the money to really support themselves and reliant on family, and how the awkwardness of having to occasionally stay with family who were better off, and all that kind of stuff, which is very, very interesting. So yeah, those were the 13 things that I read in July. Very Austenish, very Regency, with a little bit of mystery in there. I am hoping to do a bit better this month with some more variety. I have a number of different books on the go. Also, I have started class for the semester, So I have those texts to read as well. I'm currently reading a play. Yeah, but I have a whole bunch of other books on the go that I will hopefully finish this month. Fingers crossed. I'm still doing a lot of audiobook reading, which is usually rereading or nonfiction. But there are other things underway, I promise. But yeah, that is my reading update for July of 2023. Always happy to talk about books in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you all again really soon. Bye.